And when I was in the porn industry, I, I made millions of dollars. I made thousands of movies. I had tons of success. Won Performer of the Year along with, tons of other awards. But at the pinnacle of my career, when I had everything the world would say would satisfy a person that would make you happy, um, it didn't work. And my anxiety that I already had was amplified, and the depression that I was already dealing with was deepened. And at what looked like it should have been my, my mountaintop moment, the pinnacle of my career, it was actually the lowest point of my life.
Hello and welcome back to Forged. I'm your host, Tracey Martin. As always, I love to have people on this podcast that will rock your world, that will have a conversation with you honestly, openly, and transparently. You know that this podcast is built upon being forged through the fire, because the person that you are before you go through that fire will not be the same one on the other side. And that is definitely the case of our guest today, Mr. Joshua Broome. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. And I know I've been following you for a long time on Instagram. A couple reasons why is because your story, but who you are today. And I have so many young people that I coach and families that have been affected by the industry that also affected you. I would love it if you would let people know a little bit about who you are, and then I'm going to dive into some great questions.
Yeah, so my name is Joshua Broome, and I live in Dallas, Texas, with my wife Hope and our 4 boys. So we have a 5, a 4, a 2, and a 3-month-old.
Oh my gosh.
So a busy house. And I just wrote a book, 7 Lies That'll Ruin Your Life. So I'm an author. And in addition to that, I travel and speak, and I've done that full time for about 3 years. But prior to that, I've done a lot of things in my life, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you because my life is really dedicated to people stepping into their what now. They step out of a toxic environment, they end a toxic relationship, they stop putting something inside of themselves that is toxic for their lives, and they have to walk through the what next, the what now. And I love people just love helping people take that step in the direction that they didn't think possible.
No, and honestly, Joshua, one of the things that that really brought me to your content was to go from someone. And how would you describe your life, previously within the porn industry? How would you describe that just for people that are listening right now, just so we know that big leap that you made?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I obtained everything that I thought would fix my life. I grew up in a small town. My mom got pregnant with me when she was 15, had me at 16, and my dad was in that town, but he was never in my life. And I tried to meet the need in which I had, which was, needing a father. And I thought, well, if I got enough good jobs and, a lot of pats on the backs and accomplishments and accolades and all those things, it would feel like good job, son. And
Right.
that's the thing that I wanted to hear. So I tried to mitigate that, and that led to a lot of things. But I ended up in the porn industry. And when I was in the porn industry, I made millions of dollars. I made thousands of movies. I had tons of success. Won Performer of the Year along with, tons of other awards. But at the pinnacle of my career, when I had everything the world would say would satisfy a person that would make you happy, it didn't work. And my anxiety that I already had was amplified, and the depression that I was already dealing with was deepened. And at what looked like it should have been my, my mountaintop moment, the pinnacle of my career, it was actually the lowest point of my life.
So when you say the lowest point in your life, are you talking about your soul? Like where you were? I mean, because that's the thing, right? The world tells us achieve, achieve, produce. At what cost?
Yeah, I mean, to the point where I've been wrestling with my mental health. But on this day, soon after I found out that I won Performer of the Year, which meant, so this happened in 2012. I won Performer of the Year, and that meant that the industry and the studios associated with it voted that I was the most, prominent person in that industry. And I thought that award would make me feel a certain way. And when I found out I won that award and it didn't make me feel like the way that I hoped it would, it was the catalyst for me to say, hey, I've tasted and seen everything that I thought would fix my life. I've made the money. Lots of people know who I am. I have fame, fortune, and all these things. Yet I still feel dissatisfied. So not only did my plan not work, I've left a, just a breadcrumb trail of destruction behind me. And I believed I'd ruined my life to the point where I didn't want to live. And the restlessness in my soul had gotten more intense to the extent where I made a very clear, intentional plan to take my life.
Oh, you did. That was something that you mentioned. I was doing some research, and you've said that the industry is riddled with that. And even you yourself talk about that with your roommates that you had, that you've lost, the people that you've lost in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, 33 people that I know personally, that, I know their names, I know where they're from, I've had meals with them. 33 people have taken their life via suicide or overdose. Every roommate I've ever had, except one, is dead. And I think 250 people over the last 30 years have died of either murder, suicide, or overdose. And the industry is not that big. And we're talking about a very different industry, since post COVID, because, until COVID, OnlyFans didn't really exist in the way in which it does today. So prior to that, like the adult film industry, pornography, it was a very small industry.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I think the influence, even though you have it at the end of your hand with your devices and your phones and things like that, I think the industry, because I think it was Jordan Peterson that said young men today actually see more images of pornography and nudity than men in previous histories combined.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Because of the access.
yeah, absolutely. So, and yeah, accessibility, and there's no barrier to entry.
Right. And so when you look at when you first started in what you're in the industry and that, and because what I hear you saying, Joshua, is almost like there's a void that can't be filled with anything. And I love that you stepped into your relationship with Christ for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for, like, there's a lot of great stories of. I think this is where my story is unique from a lot of people's story, where a lot of people have the story that their life was absolutely disastrous, and in that moment of disaster, they gave their life to Jesus, and their life was transformed.
Mm-hmm.
For my story is that, well, the porn industry was and is so toxic and had impacted my mental and emotional health to the extent where I thought death was the best answer for me. And I left the industry solely because of that. And it was 2 years later that I gave my life to Jesus. Um, so I left the industry because it was either die or run. And I had
Right.
this really unique interaction in the moment of, like, I was literally going to take my life. And I walked into a bank and I had this interaction with this very kind bank teller. And that prompted me to call my mom. And my mom said to me everything that I didn't think that she would, because I had been hiding from her. I've been dodging her calls and texts for I've been dodging her texts for almost a year. And she told me she loved me, and she told me that I was worth more than the way I was living, and she asked me to come home. So I
Oh my
did.
gosh. What was the interaction with the bank teller?
Man, I love that you don't know this story. So on the day I was going to take my life, so I'd flown back from Atlanta. So I'd filmed I'd filmed a pornographic film in Atlanta, and then on the way back from Atlanta to Los Angeles, on the plane ride, I made the decision that I was going to take my life. And I get back home, and I, I googled how many pain pills do I need to take to
Oh my
make this
gosh.
work, and I obtained them, and I set them out on the counter, and I had them in groups so that I knew, like, these are probably the most amount that I could swallow, without like choking and chickening out, so that way I could make sure, that I did the job. And all the while doing this, I had this payroll check in my pants, and it was just driving me nuts. And for some reason, my attention was driven to it, and I took it out and I looked at it. And in the porn industry, they'll write on the memo of the check, not for tax purposes, like some people write on the memo of the check. It's like, if you're a speaker somewhere, it's like, okay, you're speaking at X conference, for
Right.
this or this. These funds are allotted for this, so that you can appropriate the funds, in whatever way. But in this industry, they would write something antagonistic, something grotesque, something perverted, almost to demean you. Because if you can take away someone's dignity, you can take away their ability to say
Yeah.
no. And if you believe that the only thing that you can say yes to is selling yourself for sex, well, you'll just say yes to everything and no to nothing, because your no, doesn't have any validity. So anyway, um, I looked at the memo and I said, I saw what it said, and I started thinking, and I was like, man, I should deposit this check in the bank. And the reason I wanted to do that was two reasons. Number one, I didn't want those funds to go wasted. So I thought, well, if I die, either my mom or my brother or someone will get those funds. And secondly, I wanted someone to justify what I was going to do. So I wanted, so normally I would do like ATM, Dropbox, mobile deposit. I would do anything other than hand the check to a real person and then see what I was being paid for. But on this day, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to hand the check to a person, and that person look me in the eyes and say, you are disgusting. You are, whatever. I wanted them to agree with me so I could carry on doing what I thought I wanted to do. And I walk into the bank and I hand her the check. I slide it across the counter, and she looks at it and doesn't blink, and does her business and hands me a receipt. And as I go to walk away, she says, "Joshua, hold on a second. Can I help you? Like, what's going on? Like, is there something I can do for you? How can I help you?
Mm.
Are you okay?" And in that moment, in that industry, you go by a pseudonym. So I had cut off anyone in my life that truly knew me. So I hadn't even heard my real name. That's why you asked me, do I go by Josh or Joshua? I hadn't heard Joshua in over a year. I hadn't heard my name spoken
Wow.
in over a year. And that bank teller looked at me and said, "Joshua, are you okay? Joshua, how can I help you?" And I think that it was a prompting of the Spirit of God that
Mm.
woke me up from the numbness in which I had created. And what I heard from her lips was more so, "Hey, you need to call your mom."
Mm.
And I ran home and I did. And so and then just the beauty of just thinking about a teller and currency. And a bank teller doesn't identify fraudulent currency by examining everything that is fake. They get very informed with what is real. And when you know what is genuine, you can identify what is counterfeit. And in the same way, when you step into a relationship with Jesus, what you will find is an authentic love that you've never experienced before, so that you can identify what's not.
Well, I think there's a full story of transformation at that point, I mean, which I think a lot of people don't. They have the language, let's just say that, I want to be different, I want to change. And you said I was going through your Instagram, and I love this quote when you said, I don't know where you spoke this at, but you said, "You are only as free as you are honest." And
Yeah,
I think that that is something that is so powerful because we live in such, like you said, a counterfeit world. People tell you this is great. They glamorize the porn industry. They glamorize the OnlyFans industry. We've got young women in high school making $250,000 a month on doing these industries. So they're validated for the commodity of their bodies. And I
yeah.
think that's really what the porn industry does as well. What do you want young people, young men, what do you want them to know about the industry as far as it is today? And where do you think I mean, it's so insidious. Would you agree or disagree?
1,000% agree. Um, because I mean, like there's nothing that is good that comes from compromising yourself through selling your body as a transaction.
Right.
We're supposed to love people and use things, and when you switch that, you love things and use people, what happens is it has a real carryover in this world. And in the way that I present it is that, hey, um, pornography is contributing to sex trafficking. It's contributing
Mhm.
to children being harmed. It's contributing to it's both men and women. But in the home, 50% of divorces that happen in America, pornography is the catalyst for that. So you're looking at fatherless homes, which equates to broken kids, which
Right.
creates a legacy of brokenness. It contributes to crime rate and all these things. But like, if you care about people, you can't say that porn is a moral good or something that you have a right to, because pornography in itself, 94% of pornography depicts violence.
Right.
A real thing happening in the world. The most popular niche of pornography is incest, and you have 60% of kids who are sexually assaulted in the United States. 60% of the time, the perpetrators between 11 and 15 years old, and they're acting out what they're seeing in pornography on their brother or sister. And
Mhm.
like, how could you say like that's not something that we should prevent from being incredibly prevalent in this world? I mean, 33% of all the data transferred on the internet worldwide is pornography. It
Yes.
makes more money than the Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA all combined. Or if you're not a sports person, Disney and Netflix combined, and you're still short a few $1 billion. And its supply is creating the demand, and that supply is really impacting men, women, and children uh, worldwide. So yes, it's insidious, it's destructive, and it is robbing people from everything that God
Yeah.
wants for you.
How do you unpack a conversation with someone who, because I hear this a lot when I have, we'll have workshops with all different, ages of Gen Zs. I have families that come in and they don't understand that their kids are actually looking at this nonstop day after day after day. I had one young man who his kid is brilliant, and he said to me, he goes, I believe that pornography is the number one thing with our minds. And I'm also a licensed brain health trainer. So it's like
Yeah,
I can look at brain scans on
yeah,
cocaine, alcohol, drugs. Pornography is worse than all of it. And
yeah.
how do you unpack that conversation with people if you're talking with them one on one on, because I think what they do is what you just said a minute ago was you equate pornography with the sex industry, the sex, is trafficking children, families. You have the mindset to do that. How do you unpack it when you have someone who's basically watching it and doesn't see the correlation to what their behavior is supporting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that our team here tries to operate, we try to approach it in the same way that people pushed back against big tobacco, with empirical data and personal testimony. And like you're saying, like there's significant neuroscience
Hmm.
um, studies around. Hey, if you look at a CT scan of someone who is a long term heroin user, and you look at the tracks that are leading to the synapse in the brain of someone who's been consuming pornography for 10 years, it's not only similar to your extent, it's worse.
Yeah.
and that's having a real impact on your ability to be as effective of a human being as you would like to be. Like, wouldn't you like to have access to better memory, your better like cognitive function? Wouldn't you like to be a better, more
Mhm.
effective individual in whatever capacity that you operate, whatever you're passionate about? Like,
Do you think that people have to, and this is just a coaching thing for me, do you think that people have to get to a place, and I don't know if I 100% believe this or not, but I see it so many times. I've said it before in the podcast that most people won't change except for two reasons. They have educated themselves enough to know that they're going to get out ahead of something and they realize choosing things that are good for them, or they've suffered enough to where they don't have an option not to make changes.
yeah,
What do
I
you
mean,
think what
I
do
would
you think
say,
on that conversation when you're looking at that, Joshua? What do you think is, because I think there was probably a time during your lifespan in this industry to where you heard all this, correct?
well, yeah, I mean, I think, you count the cost, where like you,
Right.
in also in a way where you believe you can't change, because I mean, what is true is, if you believe a lie to be true, that's essentially what my book is about. If you believe a lie to be true, it becomes true to you, and what happens on a practical basis is you suppress reality because you are in denial of it, and you live as if the comfort in which you found, even if it's counterfeit, is all that you have access to, and you found comfort there. So you have, sworn allegiance to this thing in which you've become, habitually addicted to. So
Right.
I would just say, yeah, I mean, it will lead to your demise.
Right.
I mean, anything that's toxic, it has a lifespan. You're a ticking time bomb. You like, you look at, drastic examples like Ted Bundy.
Mhm.
He got to the place mentally and emotionally, which started with pornography. And it was so interesting. I was at an event that I do some consulting for venture capital studios, and speak at some philanthropy, organizations, where it's like, how can we allot our funds in the best way to eradicate this, or how can we contribute to someone doing a good work, and just um, and someone said, well, maybe the answer is that you create a better option. You create ethical pornography. And I was like, there's no such thing. It's like, if you plant
Mhm.
a bad seed, what's going to grow from it is bad fruit.
Yeah.
And that, like, what you're saying is, well, why don't we start over? Well, if we start over, we're still going to get to the same place,
Right.
because the way that it started, like, I have a podcast that is called Unmentionable, and it chronologically tracks my story, but it also chronologically tracks, it starts with sexual ethic in like Corinth and Ephesus, and we have like a church history expert speaking into that, and then we go on this journey where pornography existing in magazines and on print, and then silent films, and then LimeWire, and some of the stuff back in the day, like on started having a digital presence, and
When
then
you Joshua, when you start to dive into that, I don't want to interrupt you that, but like your train of thought, have you come across Alfred C. Kinsey during all your studies on this?
Yes, that's a large part of the research in which we dove into.
Good.
Yeah, so I think that's in episode 6 and 7. But it's an 8-part documentary style series where we're just taking a deep dive into that. And yeah, I mean, you start examining and looking for things, and like some people were like, oh, like, this was good research, this was good stuff. It's like, well, you don't realize what was happening. You don't realize how many
Yeah.
children were abused and harmed, and the long term effect that had. But yeah, uh,
Well, I don't think
yeah,
people realize how when you pull on one thread,
yeah,
that really,
all
and
gonna
that's
unravel.
Exactly. And that's kind of where I start to like dive into some of the conversations with like the younger people who see it today from a lens of OnlyFans versus the nefarious part that was put in play decades and decades and decades ago with Alfred Kinsey and Hugh Hefner and even getting into the Planned Parenthood and the whole thing. It's all connected as a layer, I think,
Yes.
anyway, within your industry. Have you like pulled that thread?
Yeah, most certainly. I gave a talk in Santa Barbara a few weeks ago at a pro life event, and just talking about, there's this meta narrative that starts in the Old Testament, where every time there's an uprising of sexual morality, what goes hand in hand with that is child sacrifice. And in
Right.
the same way, if you believe that you can objectify people, then you're going to see people as objects, and you're going to see sex is something that is transactional at best. So of course the person in which doesn't have value, because you're training yourself to extract value from people, and if you adapt this mindset, you're going to see people as objects, and you're going to see sex as meaningless. So the byproduct of that interaction with that meaningless person, and that meaningless interaction, that human life that is created out of that action, you see as an inconvenience to you, because you never wanted, you didn't count the cost. You didn't count
Right.
the cost of that, because you just wanted to satisfy this desire that your feelings were prompting you towards, and you used this object to satisfy a desire. You never had any intention of procreating life, but that's the byproduct of that.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you just deny reality, but then when reality comes and presents itself to you, it's like that meaningless action created a human life. You can
Right.
say, well, that's just a fetus, or whatever you might say. But I think the denial of reality comes from the suppression of reality. And when
Mhm.
you operate in a way that is counterintuitive to the way that you were made and sex was created to exist, the byproduct of that is pain and suffering. And that
Right.
is, always going to be true. So to the young adult, to the kid that is thinking like porn's not a big deal, you're teaching yourself something different than what is true, because you're seeing a wrongful depiction of what sex is, because sex
Right.
is not a hobby, or
Well, it's not
something.
transactional either. I think that I mean, we've desensitized it so much for a whole generation, I think, that they don't understand. I have a lot of young girls who, when I coach, I'm like, if you can hold on to your virginity between 15 and 19, that's like they're in the fire right now with everything is hypersexualized. Everything is, oh, it's not a big deal. I had one young girl who asked me, why do I think dating is so bad today? And I said, because you guys put sex in the middle of your dating life, and
Yeah.
you can't do that. I mean, so let me ask you this, Joshua. What was like, because you said it was 2 years after when you found Christ and that, but how did you meet your wife?
Yeah. So it's so interesting, because I thought if I did enough, I did enough good things to hear that I was good, and made enough money to make me feel as if I was valuable, then I would feel differently about myself. And even when I left the porn industry, I started working in the health and fitness space, and I became successful as a gym owner, and created an online personal training platform, and did all these things. And I thought, well, if I do enough good stuff, the way I explain it, if I put enough good dirt on my bad dirt, I won't feel dirty.
I
And
love that analogy.
I think in a real way, people care more about managing the way in which people, even strangers, perceive them,
Yeah.
than caring about how they actually are doing. That you don't address the issues that you have going on in your mind and your soul, so you just pretend like you're okay when you're not. So the way that I
Yeah.
did that is, well, I'm just going to become successful in another industry. So anyway, I'm working at this gym, and in walks this girl, and I try to use my Southern charm on her and ask her out on a date, and she's just not having it. She's like, "Hey, no, thank you." And I was persistent, and she eventually agreed to go on a run with me. And on that run, I was just like, man, I feel this conviction that I haven't felt in a long time. And it was born out of the reality that I was lying to people about my past, and I would just withhold the truth until they found out from someone else
Mm,
or some other way. Then I would just deal with the, you know, the chaos when I
yeah.
got there. But with her, I was just like, man, I can't hurt this girl. I don't want to be disingenuous to this girl. I want to really honor and respect her. And I think the way that I can do that is just tell her the truth about me. And that way she's not going to she's not going to want anything to do with me. So I'm just going to
You
tell
were
her.
just ready for the rejection.
Yeah, yeah. I was certain because, like, hey, this is who I am, and you're not going to want anything to do with me because of my past. And I shared with her, I'm like, hey, pretty much a 5 minute monologue of like, this is how bad of a person I am. And at the end of that, she was pretty taken back, and she asked, well, are you doing those things now? And I was like, no, I left the industry almost 2 years ago. I most certainly have not, continued doing those things. And then, she thought, which, I could like see her processing, which seemed like forever. And then she got really serious and looked at me and said, do you know a person's not defined by the worst thing they've ever done? And they're not defined by the greatest thing they'll ever do either. There's a creator of time, space, and matter, and he created me and you, and he has the final say. That's God.
Mm,
You know who God
wow.
is. And I was like, maybe.
Tell me you snagged her up right away.
Yeah. But it was wild where she shared with me, her faith. And then after telling her what I told her, her response was, okay, tell me more about yourself. What kind of food do you like? What are your, hopes, dreams, aspirations? What's your family like? And I was just so shaken by that because she confronted everything that I thought was true about
Hmm.
myself. I thought, I am this, you know, unvalue, this person that has no value because my dad didn't value me. And I'm this person that's done a lot of bad things. And
Yeah.
like not only have I done bad things, but my bad things, the things that I'm most embarrassed about, are one click away from the world to find. So why would you want anything to do with me? Because this is who I am. And she was like, hey, those things might be true about you, and you might have feelings that are tied to those actions, but in no way are they indicative of your identity, because
Hmm.
you did not create you. You are not God. So you don't get to say, this is who I am, because what you do, your behavior, is not your identity. And it
That's how
was,
powerful labels are, though. That's
yeah.
how powerful the labels are and the building of someone's narrative, and then you build the ecosystem that really validates that every day. I mean, Joshua, to have someone to tell you that after what you have gone through, that she didn't see you through that lens, that's really powerful.
Oh yeah, and then yeah, and she, we walked and talked, and then she invited me to church, and that was, Easter 9 years ago, and she invited me to church, and I heard the gospel, and gave my life to Jesus. And that person I went on that walk with, her name is Hope, and that's my wife, and we've been married for 8 years and have 4 boys. And I think like her faith strengthened my belief in change
Hmm.
being true and God's words being real. Um, and because it's one thing to say, 2 Corinthians 5:17, talking about like, the old is gone and you're a new creation.
Right.
But for us to be in settings where people would ask her, Don't you have resentment towards him because the things that he did and the fact that it's still on the internet? And how do you not hold yourself in comparison to the thousands of women that he's been with? How does that not bother you? And her response being, well, number one, you're talking about the dead version of this
Right.
person. And secondly, why would I put the words of Satan onto him? Why would I see him in the way in which the world says
Mhm.
is true about him? And she's like, I reject that. That I trust that God's words are the most true things about him. So I'm going to see him as God sees him, not the way that Satan wants you to see him. And
Right.
just like, and then her just like clinging to that truth and it just being definitively true was so healing for me. And yeah, so I mean that happens, and then about 3 days. And again, I love like just this true aspect of God, where like God will redeem all things about
Yes.
you for His purposes and His glory. And the aspects of my personality and the characteristics of which made me me, those things didn't all go away, because some of them were good. And what
Right.
allowed me to be successful at literally, I mean, not to boast, but like anything that I gave 100% of myself to, I became successful in. And it wasn't because of happenstance. It was because I was good at those things. Or
Right.
it's like I
Right.
was so the same work ethic that led me to being successful in the porn industry or being successful in the gym industry, I had the same personality about, well, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I'm not going to just stick my toe in the water. I'm doing a
Yeah.
cannon. That's just who I am. um so like 3 days after I gave my life to Jesus, I went to this church and I was like, hey, will someone teach me how to read the Bible? Because I've got a story that I want to share. And I believe it's not for me, it's for other people to know that regardless of what you've done, regardless of what's happened to you, there is hope on the other side of submission to the person of Jesus, because he did the thing that you could never do, be perfect.
Right.
He died so that your sins could be blotted out, removed from you as far as from the east is from the west. And you can not only experience forgiveness, but you can experience abundant life. There's peace and hope and purpose and satisfaction on the other side of giving your life to Jesus, because you're actually stepping into the life that you were created for. And
Mhm.
now the gifts and the talents that you have, you're using them in a way that aligns with the very purpose that God has created you for. Because not only have you been saved from something, you've
Right.
been saved for something. And I think
Right.
that was the thing for me. It's like the more that I started to, submit to the words of Jesus and fall in love with the person of Jesus, the more things that didn't make sense before started making sense then. And all of a sudden, things that I was trying to do that weren't working, I changed the way that I was doing them. All of a sudden, I was finding hope. I was
Yeah.
finding joy. I was finding success, satisfaction. And man, that's the message that I wanted to share. And yeah, so I linked up with this pastor, and he taught me how to read the Bible, taught me how to study the Bible, and he made himself available to me. And just part of my personality, it's like I was committed to being a great athlete, so I knew that I needed coaching, because on the other side of constructive
Yes.
criticism is improvement. If
Right.
you want to be the best, you've got to get a little bit better each day. So I knew I needed a coach, so I wanted to become a great shooter, so I asked coaches to critique my shooting form so that I could be more impactful and effective. Same thing with communicating. When I was acting, I needed coaches to help me
Right.
be clear, help me articulate things, help me, with spatial awareness, like my voice and all these things. And then same thing with acting, same thing with, health and fitness and all the things. It's like, man, I had a passion for and an understanding of I need people speaking into my life that have my best interest, because
But
I
Joshua,
can't.
you also possess a very unique personality trait, and that's humility. Because very few people, I think, could have gone through what you went through, remain coachable,
Yeah,
be open to what you said. The criticism on the other side of that is change and transformation. But
yeah,
very few people possess a high level of humility and discernment as you're going through this, right? Because it's like you had to learn to not only trust yourself again, but the
yeah.
people around you, knowing what they knew to make those decisions that were best for you. So when did you notice, and maybe you don't know an exact time, but when was there a moment when you were kind of by yourself thinking through the fact that I am doing things for Christ right now? This is not an agenda. This is not anything. It's a humble heart ready to serve.
Yeah, I would say so. When my now wife and I were going through premarital counseling, we were identifying, the five love languages, and a little tidbit for anyone about to be married or that is married. Each person, you are innately designed to want to reciprocate the way that you are loved, and
Hmm.
you give that to other people. But what is true is, more often than not, the person that you're with, their love language is not the same as
Yep.
yours,
Yep.
because that would be too easy.
Oh,
And
I've been married 30 years, and I can tell you, my husband love language is service, acts of
yeah,
service, and mine is affection and time. And
yeah.
so it's kind of, and funny side note, we met in the gym as well. I used to own a gym, and we met in the gym, started dating, and have married that too. So let me
Oh,
just say, marriages rooted in the fitness industry will
there we
last.
go. There we go. I love it.
No, but
Um,
but you're right. You're right. When you transfer and you mirror that within your marriage, I had a conversation with a couple of the guys here in the studio before we started this podcast, and we talked about the person that you marry is the number one decision that you'll ever make in your entire life.
yeah, 100%. And I think, the both the spouse that you are and the parent you become, it can be that you parent and love through the lens of your brokenness, and
Hmm.
sometimes you're trying to overcome a wound that you have, and you're trying to protect someone, but you end up hurting them, because
Right.
you never heal from what hurt you.
Right.
I think that's true. But like, there was this moment where, okay, like her like number one thing is quality time. And
Hmm.
I thought, like, okay, a quality meal, a quality gift. Um, but she's like, no, I just like, the greatest present that you
Yep.
could ever give me is your presence. And that
Hmm.
was really hard for me, because I didn't really value me. I didn't think
Hmm.
I thought that there were things that I could give her, but the thought that I was the greatest thing that I could offer
Hmm.
to her, I had a hard time with that, because I didn't value myself.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to experience love in a way that I'd never experienced before. And it's almost like she loved me into healing, in
Hmm.
that she saw more in me than I saw in myself.
Yeah,
And,
and not only that, you guys are breaking the generational bondages that could have continued,
yeah,
by having these conversations. When you say the way that you are a spouse and the way that you parent, so many parents that I work with, what you said is exactly right. We parent from our brokenness as a child or what we've gone through, and that's how these generations continue and the conversations continue. How do you parent your four kids? Like how, like what's your number two? Like, give me three things that you think are really important to instill in your little guys.
yeah. I mean, that I love them not because they do something. I love them because they're mine.
Hmm.
um, and I
Love that.
think, and also, I try to be quick to apologize, or quick to say that I'm wrong, and I try to, like, I mirror, like, the way that I want them to treat me and treat their mom. I mirror,
Right.
like, me treating hope in the way that you're like, this is the way that you love people, this is the way that you interact, like, you show honor, you
Yep.
give respect, things like that. But I mean, that's, and then also, again, I want them to know, like, when I get home, even though, I've been working all day doing meetings, like whatever, I put my phone away, and for them, it's like I want them to know, like, you are the most important thing in my life, and there's nothing
Right.
that's in this world that is a greater of importance of you, because I would never want them to be telling me something important, and I'm scrolling on Instagram and I don't miss a moment where they're vulnerable, because
Right.
what I know is that there's moments of curiosity or vulnerability, and if I am not available to them and that's not clear, they're going to disconnect from doing that with me, and I'm actually robbing them and I'm robbing myself of
Hmm.
something really beautiful and something they really need. So
Would
for
you
us,
say that you're going to be the father that you didn't have?
I mean, that, so I wrote on a piece of paper the day that I was going to take my life. I will never be like, I wrote reasons that I want to die. I will
Mm,
never be a father. I will never be a husband. I will never contribute to the world in a way that leads to positive change, because I thought I disqualified myself from all those things. And I thought, sure, I
mm.
could get someone pregnant, or sure, I could, you know, be the, the legal standing, like,
Right.
father to, but I knew what it meant not to have a dad.
Right.
So I wanted to
Right.
become the thing I never experienced.
Right.
And also, I saw my mom. She was married for about 4 years to a horrible person, and I knew what a husband wasn't. So
Mm,
I wanted to give to someone what I knew was so valuable.
yeah.
Um,
But I
and
think too, Joshua, I think when you don't have something in your life, that's a conversation that a lot of parents and kids I work with, and a lot of them, they look at like what their parents, it's they see what they're doing,
yeah,
but they know something's wrong and they don't want to duplicate that. They know that they have to create something that they really are, they're craving something that they didn't even know they missed.
yeah. I mean,
You know,
that's my
it's
story.
true. Right.
That my, like, I'll say, I want to say it like this, because I take full ownership. Like, I made the mistakes that I made upon my own volition, but the wrong thinking that led me to seek the
Hmm.
affirmation in the ways that I did, it was born out of lack, because
Right. Right.
I didn't have what I needed, so I thought that I could become my own god and create my own autonomy and fix myself through the means of, approval, accomplishments, and awards, and I thought that that would satisfy my soul.
Yeah.
And
It's the world's definition.
yeah, I mean, it's Romans 12 too. It's like you're either being, conformed by the world, or you're being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Right.
Following Jesus, you're committed to this, this process of going through a metamorphosis, and it's important, because the latter part of the verse talks about so that you can discern what is God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. And there is a line in the sand. There is right and wrong. There is
Right.
good and evil, and if you have the Holy Spirit in you, it prompts you in one direction or another. And also, you have this litmus test of the Word of God, so you can see, okay, this is what's true, this is what's right, this is what's best. So I can say no to things that are not good for me. It's like,
Right.
um, I talk about this often, where it's like, we have this westernized idea of liberty, and it's all about what we have rights for, in
Hmm.
contrast to this Christian idea of liberty, which you have freedom from. And what you
Right.
have freedom from is saying no to the things you might want to do, but
Right.
are not best for you.
Well,
And,
it's the lack of discipline, I think, too. I think that, a lot of times we're definitely raising weak-minded individuals. We're definitely raising the battlefield is the mind for sure. I was
yeah,
reading the other day, and I don't know if you know about this, but have you seen the when you talked about liberty and that I was watching something with Ricky Schroeder. Have you seen the movement that he's trying to do with the pornography industry where
I've
he's
heard
going
about
with,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's going with the providers, I guess is what it is, that he
yeah.
wants to stop it from coming actually into the homes, the legalistic part of it.
Yeah, I mean, so I've spoke at Capitol Hill, the last 3 years, and had I work with NACOSI, so the National Coalition Opposing Sexual Exploitation, and they have a law firm there. And I've sat down with state representatives and advocated for and lobbied for this legislation that now 12 states have implemented in that. They're requiring age verification. And I think it's really beautiful in that, it does two things where, regarding like voting on something, they're like, okay, let's make it bipartisan and let's make this clear. Who wants to protect kids? Like,
Right.
whose hand's not going up? But so that's the foundational element of the age verification. But what the byproduct of this legislation is, consumption in those states are down 65% because
Wow.
to access the site, you've got to provide, you know, uh, legal, government issued ID. So you're going to leave a digital footprint. So all of a sudden, you can't be,
Hmm.
there is evidence of you going there. So all of a sudden,
Right.
you're as disconnected from this experience as you would like to be. So there's this real aspect of shame that's, in the picture, rightly so. And then 65% of people are saying, you know what, they're counting the cost and like, well, if people are going to potentially know that I was there, I'm going
Yep.
to withhold pressing the button. And I think
Yeah.
that points to the reality of what it is. If I had porn on my phone in a public space and someone walked past me, or someone sent me a picture that was inappropriate, and someone walked past me, the first thing I would do is put my phone down, and
Yep.
that's instinctual. That's not, me being worried about something. I'm seeing something that is for private and
Right.
public, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling a level of shame, and I'm acting out upon that. So yeah, so it's, I mean, I'm not super familiar with what he's doing per se, but I think, the age verification legislation and
No, it's huge.
um,
It's huge because what you said, the attachment of the shame. I mean, years ago, you'd have to go in a private room to rent a movie, or you had to go either way. It was separated from a quote unquote mainstream to
yeah,
where you were that person that went in there. And even that, probably has some shame. But today's world, because it is so accessible, when you do get caught, I've had parents that catch their young kids, and they're like, what do I do? I go have a conversation about it, have an honest conversation, because you don't want that connection, the
yeah.
shame part of it. So, Joshua,
Well,
in your book, I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
well, I was just gonna say there's a really great book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures by
Okay.
Kristen Jensen. So it's she leads an organization called Defend Young Minds, and this book is for like 5 to 8 year olds, maybe up to 10. But
Okay.
the overarching messaging is for everyone. In that,
Hmm.
hey, there are bad images in the world that you might see, that at some point you will see. And when you see them, remember this: if you are hurt, what do? You run to mom and dad. If you are scared, what do? You run to mom and dad. If you see something that you should not see, or someone shows you something that you should not see, some of these bad pictures, you are not bad. If you see
Right.
something bad, that does not make you bad. And don't feel like overwhelmed with shame. You're not in trouble, but please come, run to mom and dad so that we can talk about what just happened.
I
And I
love
think
that. I love
that's,
that. That's so important, though. It is. It's so important to not have the shame part of it, because then the kids will hide it.
yeah.
And I see that. I see that quite a bit. So, in your book, tell me a little bit about. I know it's what is it? The 7 lies you tell yourself.
Yeah. So 7 lies that'll ruin your life. So
Okay.
it, yeah. So 7 lies that'll ruin your life. And it's talking about, if you believe a lie to be true, it becomes true to you, and you live as if that lie is true. And, the first lie is this false approval, and thinking that, well, I can receive enough approval from people, or, graduate from like
Yeah.
one thing to one thing, or I can obtain enough of accomplishments to feel approved. It just doesn't work, and it's just this cyclical cycle. So the overarching theme of the book is, if you believe a lie to be true, you will live as if it's true, but it will
Right.
lead to your demise and your destruction. But there is a truth, and the way truth works is it dismantles and destroys lies, and you can actually build a new foundation of what is actually true. So the way it works is, you identify a lie of the world. One of the lies that the world is, most propagating as truth, and I talk about how believing that lie was destructive in my life, and then I share a story of a friend of how that lie was also detrimental in their life, and then I share the truth that actually destroyed the lie, that gave me a new foundation, and how believing that truth set me free from that lie, and how you can step into that freedom as well.
How hard is it, do you think, to tell? How hard do you think it is to tell people? Because I see in the world today, nobody really wants to hear the truth. It's like whether it's in the industry that you are in, whether it's life in general, the whole trans movement with the kids, whatever it is. It's like nobody wants to hear truth because there's then behavior and accountability on the other side for that person.
Yeah,
So
I
so
mean,
when
every
you
good.
when you meet someone, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, if you love someone, you tell them the truth.
Yes.
And for me, I was at a point in my life where I was surrounded by people who were patting me on my back during the day, but my face was in a pillow, wanting to die at night. And if you surround yourself with people who only agree with you and don't challenge you, what's going
Mhm.
to happen is they're going to be patting you on your back on your way to your detriment.
Well, and
Um,
they're probably benefiting from those lies that have been rooted
sure,
in that particular story at that point. I mean,
yeah,
that's what I
and
see out there now. Nobody wants to hear the truth, and those people that want to tell the truth, are the very bold and courageous that will
yeah.
step out and say, you sharing your story. First of all, Joshua, I think and I could be wrong. I think there's a lot of people in this industry or that are products of the industry that are still dealing with the internal struggle of being able to articulate to where they can actually help people on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately there's not a. I know less than five people who are out of the industry living somewhat of a healthy life, uh,
Wow.
but I do hear from hundreds of people that either believe it's not possible, or they're stuck in this endless cycle that they don't think there's any hope on the other side. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it goes
No, I
back
think it's
to,
I think you
you,
married
you're talking.
I think you married the right one. Her name is Hope. I think you give hope to a lot of people, Joshua. You do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would just say, the reality is there is good and evil, and like God is real, and He
Mhm.
wants to connect with you, and He made Himself available to you through the person of Jesus. And but at the same time, there is a enemy that wants to destroy you.
Yes.
So it shouldn't be to any surprise to anyone that the world looks the way it looks and people think the way they think, because
Mhm.
we're born into being selfish, to being prideful, to follow our feelings. And there's our culture around people saying, hey, follow your heart, trust your
Yes.
gut. And what is true is we need to actually inform our heart, and
Yeah.
not trust our feelings all the time, because often those things are leading to our demise.
No, they are, and I think we have a whole young generation who is connected to the emotion part of it. The whole conversation. It's all about your emotions. It's all about your feelings, and something that rather than disciplining yourself for the case of the porn industry, distancing yourself away from and disciplining yourself away from pleasures, you then run into it because you quote unquote believe that that's what you deserve, or this is what it is, or you've worked so hard. It's interesting when you look at the mindset of like even like listening to you, Joshua, and knowing a lot of the families and people that I coach, and that there's an interesting component to I love talking to you, first of all. I think this is an amazing conversation because you're able to articulate not only where you were at the moment then the transformation that happened, but then now looking forward, which is really what the message is about. When you started the conversation, you said you want to help people, you want to bring light to what this is and to show them not only the evils of the world that we do know exist,
Yeah.
but also the hope in Christ and the way that he transforms, because you are never going to be the same man that you were, and you're transformed in Christ. And now you're walking that out every single day, not just in your book, but on stage and in real life and one-on-one conversations. And I think too, the more that you do this too, Joshua, I just feel like you're kind of just getting started. You know, I know you've been doing this for a long time, and there's definitely a big footprint out there, but I think the world needs your voice more than I think the world realizes it needs your voice to be able to speak into this conversation, because you do it, and you do it so well because you're living it behind the scenes authentically.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just think in a real way, there's certain people that are brought out of chaos
Mhm.
to let people know who are still in the chaos that there is a way out. And
Yes.
then and often the way that it works is uh, you're now sent back into the chaos in which you were rescued from to say, hey, there is hope on the other side.
Yeah, no, it's so true. How can people find you or connect with you? I know the book is probably available on Amazon, and we're going to put the link and everything in the show notes, but how else can they find out more about you and the inspiration that you talk about?
Yeah, got the book. So Seven Lies That'll Ruin Your Life. You can grab that on Amazon, and on my website also. So joshuabroome.me. So there's an E on my last name. So Joshua Broome.me is my website. So there's information regarding like requesting me to speak or my book or the podcast. So Unmentionable is a big thing that we're working on. So, and in addition to the podcast, there's a course called Unbound that we're hoping that hundreds of thousands of people will find freedom for the first time and live in it. So that's stuff that we're working on. And then also like finding me. So social media across the board, it's I am Joshua Broome. And there's lots of fake ones out there. So if there's no blue check mark, it is not me. So
No, I
but yeah,
appreciate it. And we're going to link all this in the show notes too, because I think your message is really important. And for someone who is on the front lines with families and kids and young adults and people getting married and seeing it on a daily basis, this is a huge influence, and people are very desensitized to the true nature of it.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joshua. We will be in touch, and I appreciate you for your time very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You as well.